Welcome back, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast, the college off-season podcast, where you could say we're less of the regular season, but more of the off-season, in a historic night in women's college basketball, where you have a rematch of last year's national championship between Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes, and then you have Angel Reese, Flau'jae Johnson, and the LSU Tigers, and then in the later game, you have Paige Beckers and the Yukon Huskies, and Juju Watkins and the USC Trojans facing off for a chance to go to the Final Four. And me and Ryan are going to talk about men's college coaching hires. Ha, gotcha. April Fools, guys. I don't know if anybody was fooled at all, but that was my poor attempt as an April Fool's joke. Don't really know how it's going to be received. But speaking of April Fools, I remember a couple years ago when Roy Williams announced that he was retiring on April Fools, and like everyone thought it was like a big joke. And then I come to find out, oh no, he's actually gone. Hubert Davis is going to take over. So that's what I kind of learned, that like April Fools is the worst day to possibly like drop any kind of news because absolutely nobody is going to take it serious. But without further ado, we actually are going to get into the main topic of the show. And ironically, after last show's ended, Ryan was completely cut off by the timer, and he was going to talk about how Kentucky fans are not happy with the recent coaching of their head coach, John Calipari. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what side of that argument you're on, Ryan, they're stuck with him for another year. What are your thoughts?
Um, I think about this when I think about Kentucky fans. Who are you gonna get instead of Cal? I understand the struggles in the past couple of years. And by the way, back to that April Fool's thing. That's exactly what I was gonna say. You can't give out information on April Fool's Day. Everyone's gonna be like, "Ha ha, nice April Fool's joke." But back to Kentucky, I don't think I understand the struggles, but there's not many coaches that you can get right now, and the college basketball is changing. There's teams being added just like football to the conferences, but just stick with him and see what he can do. You may lose a couple freshmen this year, like Reed Shepherd, most likely, and Rob Dillingham, and Adu Thiero has already entered the portal. But just ride with him one more year, and then you all can cry about it next
Then you all can cry about it. I love it. Yeah, I think you're spot on because I think a big key to Cal's future in Lexington is going to be with who all on this team comes back. And we don't know. I mean, like you said, Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham, they're both projected lottery picks. I mean, the assumption is that they're gone. I know there's a popular theory that Reed's going to stick around because, his dad and his mom both played at Kentucky and, he's got some kind of fictional loyalty to them. I don't know if you've how I don't know how many of my social media posts you've seen, but I don't believe loyalty is a thing in sports altogether. That's just my personal opinion. But um, yeah, I think it's going to determine on who really comes and goes from this year's team to determine his success setting up in the future. Because as we've seen, really in the history of college basketball, games in March are won by experience, and typically outside of the 2 years with Oscar Tshiebwe and Kellen Grady, Kentucky teams really just have not had a lot of experience, and that's been one of his biggest downfalls. And I love when he blames the youth of his teams every year after loss, and it's like, bro, you're building the roster. Like, what are you expecting to happen? Like, I don't know. But that's enough of that. Yeah, whatever happens in the Cal situation at Kentucky, how the rest of his tenure for Big Blue Nation turns out, I guess is yet to be seen. But moving on from a team you don't like, Ryan, to a team that you do like. Louisville just hired a new head coach in College of Charleston basketball coach Pat Kelsey, which is really ironic because the former College of Charleston coach becomes the new Louisville head coach, and then a former Louisville coach becomes the new College of Charleston coach. So it all kind of came full circle here. But one thing at a time, Ryan, what were your thoughts on the hiring of Pat Kelsey?
To be honest, as a Louisville fan, I did not know a lot about Pat Kelsey before they announced him and he did the press conference. But one thing that sticks out to me about him is his energy. I love his energy and how he's embracing the Ville and how he just wants to win. He said, if you don't plan on winning, don't put on your shoes. And I really like that quote that he said. I think he did really, really well in that press conference. And if you it he Louisville posted on their Instagram page and probably Twitter, they posted reactions of people about the Kelsey hire, and there was guys like Jay Billis, Chris Paul, giving just good information for us to know about him. And back to, I did want to say something about the Kentucky Oakland game.
Hmm.
Jack Golke looks like the most 3 point. He looks like every 3 point shooter that goes in the March Madness and just destroys your team and kills your team's hopes. He looks like the typical 3 point shooter that just busts your bracket. But you know, one thing about Kenny Payne is that he really, I like him as a guy. Obviously, Louisville alum, he did good things, but he didn't really bring that energy. And he 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 also like kind of like with the rivalry, he almost wanted us to be friends, which I don't really get that. Like, Les, would you want to be friends with North Carolina fans?
Hell no.
That's what I figured. That a rivalry is a rivalry, and it needs to stay the competitiveness and the almost hate for each other, but just on the court. And I do like the hire. He went down the, I think it was in the Louisville women's facility. They have like a slide. He went down that, and like he's just having a great time so far. And we already have two Charlestown play. We have three players on the team, by the way. We need to hit the portal hard. I'm not even gonna lie, because we got nobody coming in. But we got Charlestown's leading scorer and then a 6'11" guy, and we have one returning starter. But I like the hire. I really like his energy, and I hope that he could do good things at Louisville. And for Chris Mack, I think that Chris Mack is a good coach. We had a really good year when we were ranked number one at one point. That happened to be the tournament canceled COVID year. We had Jordan Morrow, we had Stephen Enoch, Ryan McMahon, and I think that Chris Mack could do good things at Charlestown. I am a big believer in Chris Mack, and I think he's a good coach.
I definitely agree that Chris Mack is a good coach. I feel like he just inherited a very bad situation at Louisville. And to be honest, I mean, now that the death penalty is finally over, we're actually getting a fresh start with Louisville basketball. And it would have been interesting to see if Chris Mack had inherited this time of Louisville basketball rather than the time he got. So I definitely agree with you on that. And I'm really back to Pat Kelsey being the Louisville head coach. I'm glad you brought up the press conference because a lot of Louisville fans are already saying that, he already got his first win as a Cardinal with that press conference. And watching it in real time, I kind of shared a lot of the same opinions initially. I wanted to run through a brick wall for this guy. Dude brought the ton of energy, had a great press conference, but then my overthinking brain started to realize a couple things. A lot of what he said in this press conference, I took away as he pretty much copied a lot of famous quotes from a lot of other famous coaches. The famous one where he says, "If you want to ask if you want to know if I can recruit, look at my wife." That was a Will Muschamp quote. Or the one where he talks about his faith, his family, and Louisville basketball. That's an old Vince Lombardi, Jim Valvano quote. So I kind of took that away. So that was a little concerning in my part, is I feel like he didn't have any original content, and I think a lot of people it just went over a lot of people's heads at the time. But as far as like the energy, I definitely agree with you because like even when he speaks, like you feel he's the type of person. It seems like you really feel the energy that he brings. And not to mention, if we want to talk about his success as a coach, he's been a head coach for 12 years now. He's got a career 68 winning percentage. He's only had one losing season, and that was his first year as a head coach. So I mean, you're kind of getting your feet wet at that point. He's got 7 win seasons, 4 NCAA tournament appearances. Yeah, I mean, the guy can get it done. It's just going to be a matter of can he adjust from coaching at a mid-major college to coaching at a big college. So that's my
Yeah,
takeaway from the Pat Kelsey hiring. I'm interested to see how it plays out. Dude definitely has energies. I wish he just had a little bit of more originality on his opening press conference. But hey, it sold the Louisville fans, which that's main thing number one.
Yeah.
But unless you have anything to add about Pat Kelsey, we can move on to your next coaching hire. But that's up to you.
I did like some of his quotes. Some of them were kind of crazy. Nobody was expecting. He said he was his wife's third option, and he's Louisville's third option. Which I mean, and he said it, it worked out being his wife's third option. But I mean, I just I like him so far. It's gonna be really really hard for us to get back to being really good, and it's gonna take some time. So can't wait. Every time we get a new coach, I'm excited for the new season until disappointment. But hopefully, we are on the other side of that.
Kind of like how I felt about this Duke team. Ooh, was that too soon? Shit. Because I had a lot of high hopes for this team, and they played. It was a very roller coaster, but that's a roller coaster season in a lot of ways. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Um, you also, one of your other teams also got a new head coach in Ohio State, and I'm being completely honest. You're the Ohio State expert on the podcast, so you tell me what your thoughts are on the new Ohio State basketball coach.
I really liked it. I know that they were going after Dusty May, which obviously Dusty May picked the rival. But when Jake Diebler kept winning, obviously a lot of Ohio State fans know his brother John Diebler. They were both at a rec- they were both at like probably AAU games. I think it was recruiting because I think John is at Xavier or maybe Butler. But I I I like the promotion of head coach because first game he has to play number two Purdue, and we beat him. I don't know how they beat him because we usually can't guard Edie, and Edie hangs his nuts on us. Um, made less laugh. Yes. But 8-3 since taking the job, he's really done really well. Like Pat Kelsey, I was saying, he brings the energy. The players are getting more energy. We're losing some starters, but we're looking to get Michi Johnson back from South Carolina, which I think would be good because he was a double digit scorer at South Carolina. They had a disappointing tournament because they lost first round, but he's a really good player. He lights it up from three. He kind of reminds me of this is kind of bad timing. Caleb Love, not in the tournament, not this tournament, but he shoots a lot of threes and he makes it. He makes it most of the time. Um, he had Diebler had a really good fight in the Big Ten tournament. We barely lost to Illinois. Illinois was a very very good team, but we had a strong run, and so I'm excited to see. We got to go just like Louisville. We got to go to the portal. We got to get some players. That will hopefully happen. But I'm excited to see in the future with Diebler as a coach for Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, taking over as an interim coach is never really a fun position to be in because if you win, sometimes it's looked at as, the previous head coach's team, and if you lose, it's all on you. So it's a tough situation to be in. So you always got to respect those type of hires when schools do decide they want to remain loyal to the guy who took over in such a tough time. One of my teams in Texas did the same thing with their basketball season last year, hiring Rodney Terry as the full-time head coach, which I got on this podcast and said if they didn't do that, that I was going to drop Texas basketball as one of my teams altogether because that's just how I feel about Rodney Terry. Kind of like Pat Kelsey, for a lot of Louisville fans right now, Rodney Terry. Every time I listen to him talk, I just want to run through a wall for this dude. I love Rodney Terry. This season wasn't, didn't go as I expected in a lot of ways, but I still think Rodney Terry is a phenomenal coach, and hopefully Jake Diebler is going to do great things for you all. Also, because I looked it up while you were talking, John Diebler is the director of recruiting for Butler in
Hmm.
case anyone was wondering about that. But moving on to the next one, and this is where Matt wasn't able to come on the show today, and this is where I think we're definitely going to miss him the most on this show because I feel like he would have had a lot to say about this one. Another big coaching move, Dusty May to Michigan. I know, Ryan, I know we're talking about that team up north, but overall, what are your thoughts on Dusty May to Michigan?
It surprised me a little bit. I know he was. I know he's looking at Michigan, and it seemed like Louisville had him right in their hands, and they just fumbled the ball. I do have a funny story about my dad. I mentioned him a couple times on this show. We were out in Arizona. We were golfing, and we were on the cart path, and he showed me like this. ESPN like 680 post. I think it was them or 93.9, and it showed like a picture of him breaking news, and it was like it was the Louisville, and so first glance you think, oh, we hired him. Well, he didn't check the caption. So I read the caption. I was like, University of Michigan. And he looked back and he was like, what? And he was so disappointed. Oh my gosh, he didn't read the caption, so he thought we got Dusty May. But I mean, I think Dusty May is a really good coach. He had back to back tournament appearances. 2 years ago, made it to the Final Four. Their FAU's big guy Vlad just entered the portal, so he could potentially be going to Michigan. So I think he's a good player, but he signed a 5-year contract with Michigan, 126 and 69 record at FAU, and I think that he wants to bring Michigan back to where they were dominant, back making a tournament every year because this past season was really really disappointing for them. Doug McDaniel into the portal, but I I think that he is a very good coach also.
This is where I would pay good money for Matt to be on the show today because this is where I want to look him right in the eye and tell him exactly how I feel about this move. And it's not what anybody else is thinking. And honestly, that meme that that post that your dad showed you, that totally would have been a great April Fool's joke, by the way. So I feel like that was a little more poorly timed on their part. But overall, Dusty May to Michigan, I think, is an overrated move altogether. Dusty May put together a solid team that surprised a lot of people a year ago. But this year, when the expectations were actually on, they underachieved. They were inconsistent throughout the year. And I should know, they cost me a lot of money on parlays. And then they got bounced early in the tourney with the same core that they went to the Final Four with last year. What's concerning about this to me is that Dusty May appears to be great in the hunter role, but going to the Big Ten, a team with with some kind of basketball history, you're not the hunter anymore. You're now the hunted. And what I saw from FAU a lot this season, now when they became into the hunted role, they weren't the same team. That is one good thing possibly going for him is that Vlad Golden may decide to transfer to Michigan if he's entering the portal. And now with Dusty May at Michigan, we all assume that's where he's going to go. That'll be one good thing he has going for him. But overall, I mean, when the expectations are on, I did not really was not sold on anything Dusty May did this year. And could not wait. I cannot wait for Matt to hear this part of the clip to hear what he has to say and tell me on the next podcast how wrong I am. But that's just me.
Yeah, they did struggle this year. I could tell a difference between this team and, or even though it was the same team, this year and last year. It was just way different. They lost to Northwestern, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it was just a disappointing tournament this year. But we will see. We will have to see.
I got to show some love to a former Duke guy, Chris Collins, the head coach of Northwestern. Shout out to you for knocking Dusty May and the FAU Owls out of the tournament. But I think it's time to move on to the next coach we got to talk about. There have been a lot of hires going on so far in the early offseason. We're not even through the college basketball season. We got the Final Four coming up next week, which my Blue Devils did not get to, unfortunately. But anyways, not going to cry about it. Darian DeVries, the former Drake head coach, is heading to West Virginia. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this move?
I always, every time I saw Drake in the tournament, I always thought uh, they were a tough team. They were going to be a tough team to beat, and that was going to be a team that could knock out uh, whoever they were playing. Um, he's going to West Virginia. A couple years ago they had Bob Huggins, who said some crazy things for him
Yeah.
to get when he resigned. But 150 and 55 record at Drake. He took Drake to three tur- tournament appearances. Um, Two-time Missouri Valley Coach of the Year. That's really really good. Um, and yeah, I mean they had a West Virginia had kind of an underwhelming season this year. They had one of the Louisville guys, Quinn Slazinski, who I kind of keep up with because he played under Rick Pitino at Iona and for St. John's a little bit. But you know, they're looking to be. I don't know if I want to say like the good Bob Huggins teams, but they're looking to get back on track because it just hasn't been like that for a couple years now.
Agreed, and I would have been completely here for it if you actually got here and said, "Hey, I think the Bob Huggins West Virginia teams are going to be back." I'd have been completely here for it.
Mhm.
And one of the big things that stands out about Darian DeVries for during his time at Drake is how good of a job he recruited, for a mid-major school like Drake. And if you can recruit that well, at a school like that, no offense to Drake, let's just call it what it is. Imagine what he could do at a Big 12 school. A conference that a lot of people think is the best conference in college basketball. Matt and I have shared our disagreements on that over the years, but that's neither here nor there. Um, and the thing also too is he's been around a winning culture. Like he coached as an assistant at Creighton for 17 years under both Dana Altman and Doug McDermott. So he's been around successful coaches and he's learned from some of the best. But the best part about this move is that his son Tucker who is an absolute bucket, by the way, is following him to West Virginia. So before he's even coached a game, like getting his son to follow him, that's win number one. Dude's a bucket and he's going to be a fan favorite in Morgantown. And that's all I have to say about that. And before we move on to the next coach, it looks like Caitlin Clark got her lick back against LSU because they're headed now to the Final Four again.
Whoa, I haven't. Or I watched the game before I got on this, but um, I am not the biggest fan of LSU, so I was hoping that I would win. But we still got a good game later. Juju Watkins is an absolute bucket, and the whole South Carolina team is an absolute bucket.
The USC, Southern California, they're not the South Carolina.
Oh, but you, you know what I meant.
I knew I knew what you meant. No, one of my buddies actually predicted South Carolina and Southern California playing for the national title, and I literally commented on his post and said, battle for the real USC, I see.
Yeah, yeah. I hear a lot about that. I mean, I have no correlation with USC or South Carolina, but I hear a lot about that fight, and I just when I hear USC, I think of like Southern Cal. So
Oh, I did too. And I had a friend who went to South Carolina, for college, and he would always refer to them as USC. And back in those days, Southern California was the more prevalent in sports USC. And I would always like try to correct him, and he was like, "Look, dude, we've been a college longer than they've been a state, so I don't want to hear it." I'm like, I can't really argue that logic, to be completely honest.
yeah, but sorry, I meant UConn versus USC. Paige Beckers is a bucket. She got injured, but she's back now.
Oh yeah,
That is going to
Paige
be an
Becker.
excellent.
Are you ready for one of my hot takes in women's sports?
What is that?
If Paige Beckers never got hurt, Caitlin Clark would not have the buzz that she has right now. I think a healthy Caitlin, I mean a healthy Paige Becker is almost completely word vomited there, is a better basketball player than Caitlin Clark.
That is a hot take, and I mean I can't really disagree with it. I think I they're both really good players, and she was getting a lot of hype. Someone said that she was one of maybe it was Don Staley or something
It
like
was
that.
Don, yeah, Don Staley said the same thing, and I was like, huh, I'm not the only one. I love it.
Yeah, Paige Beckers is an elite team, and someone one of the sports pages posted like the whatever year women's USA team was absolutely stacked.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, they had like Diamond Miller, they had Cameron Brink, they had um, Caitlin Clark, Haley Van Lith, should have said Louisville, um, and Paige Beckers too. And yeah,
which before we get to the next coach, I know we kind of went on a little off topic, but that's totally okay because it's a big night in women's college hoops right now. But
it
I
is.
actually found out today the real reason why Haley Van Lith left Louisville for LSU. Apparently, her dad went to Jeff Walls and asked for more NIL money, which of course Jeff Walls is like, I mean, I don't really, coaches don't really handle that. You got to go to Club 502 for all that. And he's like, okay, well, if they can't promise me more NIL money, then I want a guarantee that Haley Van Lith is going to get more shots. It's like, and Jeff Walls is kind of like, dude, she's playing 38 minutes a game. What else do you want? And I'm not guaranteeing anything. And it's like, well, and next thing you know, she's going to LSU. Of course, where a lot of people remember, if a lot of people remember correctly, Baylor was actually her second choice in college when Kim Mulkey was the head coach of Baylor. So that's why it was a very popular theory that she was going to go to LSU. But if it was about the shots, that clearly didn't work out in her favor, is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and if I remember, I think she came from like all the way from like Washington, like
Hmm.
where she played high school. I remember her coming in. I was really excited for her, and um, her. I didn't know that about her dad, but we were at a Louisville game a couple years ago, and her dad like started getting up and like dancing in front of everyone when the music was playing. It was pretty funny. But she was like this section over from me, but it was cool.
Hmm. Yeah, her dad sounds like the women's basketball version of LeVar Ball, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
But
Great.
yeah. Anyways, yeah, Haley. Yeah, we can. I think we could dedicate a whole offseason podcast to just women's college hoops. I feel like we've really shortened them this year, but of course we've had a lot to talk about on the men's side, so we kind of got distracted there. But oh, we got 10 minutes left. We better get through these last coaches that we're talking about.
Yep.
The
For
next
sure.
one I want to talk about is Vandy. Is moving on from Jerry Stackhouse, and they hired JMU coach Mark Byington. Overall, Brian, what were your thoughts on this move?
Um, I like Mark Byington at JMU. JMU, I really liked this year. I They busted my bracket because I thought Wisconsin was gonna go really far just by their performance in the Big Ten. But JMU really manhandled them. They I remember them beating Michigan State earlier in the year at Michigan State, which is a really tough win. JMU sports are popping right now, both football and basketball. Um, but yeah, I think what he did at JMU this past season or two was really good. 82 and 36 record at JMU. Um, he had a really tough squad. And one thing I say about Vandy is I think their court is kind of cool. I think
Yeah.
it's very interesting, and the years with Jerry Stackhouse weren't good, and that they're looking to get back on track, like about every team that we're talking about right now. So yeah, I like it. I like how as dominant his team was in the first round.
It's going to be really ironic for me to say that I like this move as well because my team dropped JMU by 38 in the tournament.
Yeah.
But like you said, they had a great year. They spent 12 weeks in the top 25 and they beat Wisconsin by 11 in the tourney. He got hired the COVID year, and each year they won more games. And he what I like the most about this move is that he teaches a really physical play style, and I think that's going to really bode well for him in the SEC. So that's where I stand on this move. And for time constraints, I think we got to move on to our last couple coaching hires. We got Dan Sprinkle going to Washington. Overall thoughts on this move? The former Utah State coach, Dan Sprinkle, that is.
Um. Yeah. Washington. It sucks that Dan Sprinkle is not going to be able to coach Keon Brooks because Keon Brooks. I don't know if probably a lot of started his career out at Kentucky. Um, I think he's a really good player. He was, Dan Sprinkle going to Washington. I watched some of their games. They got a couple of transfers last year that I knew, but he's this is where the expansion comes in. He's stepping into the Big Ten, which welcome. That's all I can say. Not that I'm not saying that they're the best conference at all. I'm just saying that it's a little bit of a different type of play, more physical. But um, as you said, previous coach at Utah State,
Yeah.
yeah, um, yeah. I mean, I think that Washington they had some good players. They got some transfers, but they're looking to get better, and I think that this is a good hire.
Yeah, and I think the athletic director, Aaron O'Connell for Washington, would agree with that statement because all she could say about the dude is that he's a winner. And of course, if you can win at Washington State, that's definitely a good look on your resume. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be a different, with the conference change, it's going to be a different look, different competition that Washington's going to be playing, from here on out. But We'll all see how it adjusts. I love his name though. If anything, Dan Sprinkle. I don't know. It's a
Sounds
cute
like a
name.
movie name. Dan Sprinkle,
I'm,
BYU.
I'm
It
trying to
sounds like Dan
find.
Smith.
I'm trying to find like what type of character he would play in a movie. I think we should just like put it in the comment, tell people to vote in the comment section below, or just comment in the comment section below after the video. What kind of movie would Dan Sprinkle play in? Let's just go from
Matt
there.
would. I think Matt would like this. What we're talking about right now.
Oh yeah, Matt would like. Yeah, Matt's really sad that he missed the pod today because he would be all over this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Danny Sprinkle is a very interesting name.
I'm still trying to figure out what movie that guy would play in. But anyways,
I have no
we got to
clue.
get to our last coach. Stanford hiring Kyle Smith from Washington State. Overall thoughts on this move, Ryan?
From Washington State to Stanford, I think that's a very interesting move because when I look, obviously I don't have big ties in the Pac-12, right?
Yeah.
Both teams, but they honestly remind me kind of close, like to each other, from from uh conference to conference. Washington State had a really really good year. They were second in the conference play, and they were seventh in the tournament, and they beat Drake, who I thought again could be a team that could uh beat some higher seeds or lower. You get what I mean? But 94 and 71 record at Washington State. Very very good year for them, by the way.
Mhm.
Now, Stanford is coming in the ACC, and again, we talked about this past couple podcasts. They keep sleeping on the ACC. Yeah, I know you agree with that.
I've only
The only
said it a few
reason
times,
I just want to
but
mention this, the only reason NC State got in the tournament was because they won the ACC, which is crazy here because they had like 14 losses or something like that, which I don't think that would have got them in the tournament without winning
without
the.
winning the ACC tourney, they definitely would not have gotten in the tournament. Now
No,
here they are in the Final Four. Look at that.
I know that's great. The game before DJ Burns had 4 points and he had 20. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, but
It happened. It's
um,
happened throughout his entire NC State crew. He'll have like 4 points the day before he plays Duke, and then he'll go. He'll look like Zach Randolph mixed with Hakeem Olajuwon against Duke. It's just how it goes.
I didn't realize how many colleges he went to before.
Yeah.
Started at Tennessee, but Kyle Smith to Stanford. Um, stepping in the ACC is it may be difficult for him. All the teams stepping in the ACC, SMU, Stanford, Cal. It could be a difficult first year for him, but now what he did at Washington State was really really good this past year.
Oh, absolutely. And this clearly was a move for Smith to stay in a big conference with Washington State going to the Mountain West. But overall, this is a win for Stanford just because they got rid of Jared Haas. I mean, that dude was an absolute loser. Some Louisville fans think that Kenny Payne was bad. This dude was awful. But yeah, so it's good to see Stanford now possibly getting a competent coach. So more than anything, that wraps up the coaches that we did talk about. I didn't really put this in the notes, so I didn't really expect you to maybe have an opinion on this. But one thing I thought an interesting hire is that a friend of LeBron James, a former high school teammate Drew Joyce, was actually hired for Duquesne to be the next head coach there. So I thought that was a pretty good move. So shout out to Lil Drew. But anyways, that wraps up the topics that Ryan and I were gonna talk about today. As always, like and subscribe to Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channel, and be sure to comment in the comment section below what type of movie Danny Sprinkle would play in. Um, but as always, follow the social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Threads. That's at Less is More Sports. And we got about a minute and a quarter and a three-quarter left. That's probably the most weird way to say a minute 45 seconds left. But anyways, any closing thoughts you have, Ryan?
Um, I'm excited to watch the Final Four. I have in my bracket I had UConn winning, but I actually had Alabama UConn um like in the Final Four, which is crazy.
That was good. I think I had UConn and Arizona, so you got the Alabama part right. I had UConn and Purdue in the championship game with UConn winning, so
That, yeah, it's still possible. It said that only 2% of people had NC State going to the Final Four. That was probably all NC State fans, just as a fun, meaningless bracket. But
Right.
they're
It was
actually
probably
good.
either NC State fans or trolls, one of the two.
Yeah, but
But as for the time being, definitely looking forward to the Final Four. But as
yes,
for the time being, now I'm watching this UConn USC game right now, hoping that my girl Paige Beckers gets some buckets out there. Little
yep.
Paige buckets out there. But anyways, no. But that Juju Watkins, she's a bucket too, and only a freshman. That's impressive.
Hmm.
But yeah, we're definitely gonna have to talk more about women's hoops when the off season officially comes. But as always, thank you all for watching. That's all the time we have. We officially out.